Good morning, Commanding Officer, Executive Officer, Command Master Chief, and staff. I would like to welcome you to Naval Medical Readiness and Training San Diego's 2020 Women's Equality Month event. My name is HM3 Isabella Amaro, and it is my honor to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for today's event. Each year, in the month of August, we highlight Women's Equality Day. This was established by Joint Resolution of Congress in 1971. Women's Equality Day is observed on the 26th day of August and commemorates the 1920 passage of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which gave women the right to vote. The observance has grown to include focusing attention on women's continued efforts towards gaining full equality. This year's theme, Chipping Away at Inequality, highlights the harsh journey of many groups struggle to achieve equality. Specifically, women have played a vital role in the course of human history. From raising families to leading armies, women have made untold contributions to history. In the 100 years since the 19th Amendment has been passed, women have made strides in every facet of human life. More and more, the world is looking to our daughters, sisters, and mothers to lead us, heal us, to employ us, to thrill us on the fields of play, and protect us on the fields of battle. This year, the Diversity Committee wanted to take the time to hear from some women of the Navy. We have chosen these remarkable women based on their intelligence, kindness, and impact of those around them. We hope you find these interviews as impressive as we do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is HM3 Rodriguez, and I have the pleasure to introduce our honored guest today. It is my honor to introduce retired Commander Janet Kowalski, who currently works in the cardiology clinic. Ms. Kowalski served as a registered nurse for 22 years as part of the Nurse Corps. She joined as an officer in 1971 and retired as the commander in 1992. RN Janet knew she always wanted to be a nurse since she was young.
Good morning. I am privileged to be speaking to you today. I was asked to talk on Women's Equality Month, and I am a retired Navy nurse. I retired as a commander, Nurse Corps, in 1992, and I came in the Navy as a Nurse Corps candidate in 1970. So you can figure out how old I am by that. My mother was an Army nurse in World War II, and she was my mentor. I graduated from the same nursing school she did, and chose the Navy because I love the uniform. The Navy paid for my last year in nursing school, and then I owed them 3 years of service. But I fell in love with the Navy Nurse Corps. I loved what I was doing. I loved the opportunities that were provided to me. I felt like as a woman, I was given leadership opportunity probably much quicker, much faster than I might have seen in the civilian sector, where you have to pay your dues a little bit longer before you get a title of leadership. I was very well trained at the medical center where I trained at, which was St. Joseph's Hospital School of Nursing at the St. Joseph's Hospital Medical Center in Syracuse, New York. And the other thing that the Navy gave me was the opportunity to go back and get my degree as a full-time duty under instruction. And I was able to go to a very prestigious nursing school in the University of Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas. Otherwise, would have never been able to go to that school. So I received my baccalaureate in nursing from that school. One of the things that they asked me to go over was, what are the biggest successes since you have been in the Navy? I think making rank was a big success for me. Leadership roles early on. I loved traveling overseas and being independent. I went both to Adak, Alaska and Yokosuka, Japan. I received a meritorious, it was called the Meritorious Medal for helping develop they call it the LD, it's an LDRP. It's a newer concept. Well, it was a newer concept 20 years ago. It's not a new concept now. But in earlier labor and delivery rooms, you had a separate labor room, a separate delivery room, a separate postpartum room, a separate recovery room, and the baby was kept in the nursery. The newer concept of labor, delivery, recovery, and postpartum being in the same room was developed about 20 years ago, and I was at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton at the time in charge of all those areas, including the nursery and pediatrics, and I implemented them developing that for that hospital, and for that I received a meritorious medal for it. So that was a privilege for me. Another thing they asked me to talk about was one of the big hardships you had to overcome during your career. As a military member, you have to meet the needs of the service, and that often comes with receiving orders to areas that you may not be able to take your spouse. And I was married very early on in the Navy. In fact, I was married at a time when if I had become pregnant, it would have been an automatic out for me, because at that time women could not have dependents under 18. So I remember I came in 1971 active duty, and I don't think it was until I think the 1980s that dependents under 18 could, women could come in the service with dependents under 18. So one of the big hardships for me was being separated from spouses, like the men and women now today are when they go on deployment. So my deployment was going to a naval hospital in another country. My husband was a U.S. Border Patrol agent, and he couldn't just transfer over there and work in the Border Patrol in Japan while I was over there. So we had to work out. I went over with excess leave on the books, and he came over and visited, and then I came over back on leave to visit to kind of break it up, like a deployment. And then Adak, Alaska was the same thing. He was still active duty in the Border Patrol, and I went up to Adak, Alaska, which is way down the end of the Aleutian Island chain, and it was hardship duty. It was 1,200 miles from Anchorage, Alaska, and you took this Revolution 20-passenger Lear jet to that duty station, and I was there for 18 months. The weather there, it's in the middle of the Bering Sea, was very inclement. I think it was two weeks before I even saw the mountains surrounding that little duty station, because the weather is so difficult. So you learn how to communicate with your spouse. At that time, we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have tablets or computers that could just Wi-Fi us and Zoom us like people have today. So what my husband and I did is we made hour-long tapes to each other that we just talked for an hour and sent the tapes. And my husband was so good, I got usually at least 3 tapes from him a week for 2 years while I was in Yokosuka, and he did. We did more phone calls when I was in Adak, Alaska, a little more modern when I was there. Another thing they asked me to talk about was what was a big improvement of women equality since you joined the military. When I first came in the military, if a woman was married and she was a military officer, at the time there weren't very many female enlisted. It was mostly women officers for the regular Navy and women Nurse Corps officers. We couldn't get married BAQ. Men could get married BAQ, but the Navy, it wasn't equal rights really for women and men. So if my husband had a profession, that was considered, I guess, augmenting the income, and we weren't privy to get that married BAQ. Whereas a man could be married to a school teacher or a nurse, and he still could get married BAQ. So it was a source of contention for me. And in 1975, with the Equal Rights Amendment, that changed, and I was able to get married BAQ after that. But I had been in the Navy since 1971, and it was not retroactive because I got married shortly after I was in the Navy. Another thing that was different for women when we first came in, I talked about you couldn't have dependents. Pregnancies were an automatic out, is they allowed pregnancy in the military for women. And at first, they only allowed women to have 4 weeks of postpartum leave while they were recovering from having their babies. And sometimes if they were C-section, they'd add on a couple extra weeks. Well, that changed, and not too recently, to now 3 months or 12 weeks, which is great for women because it gives them time to bond with their child, and it's really, I think, important for family life that women have that opportunity. They asked what would be a piece of advice that I would give. A piece of advice that I would give is that this is probably the greatest experience of my life, being in the Navy, being exposed to so many different cultures, cross-sections of people working from all over the United States, Puerto Rico, the Central America. We've had countries that have brought people, immigrants that have come into this country and joined the Navy. So you're exposed to different religions, and it's just, to me, the Navy is like the United Nations, and it's a great opportunity to work with your fellow men and women and really see different avenues of life. I was a little farm girl in upstate New York. I came from a very large family. There were 8 children, but my exposure to life was the dairy farm. And I wanted to join the Navy and see the world, and that's exactly what I did, and I loved it.
Our next interviewee is Commander Lively Schwartz. She currently works in the pediatric department. Commander Lively joined the Navy in 2003 out of Arizona after being accepted into medical school. Her kindness and positivity is unequaled by those around her.
Hi, I'm Katie Lively Schwartz, Dr. Lively. I'm a commander in the United States Navy and a pediatrician. I've been in the Navy since 2003 when I commissioned, just prior to starting my first year of medical school through the Health Professions Scholarship Program. I've had many ups and downs throughout my Navy career, but mostly ups, which is terrific. My biggest success since I have been in the Navy is probably making it to this point. I've now been active duty for just over 13 years and seen multiple different duty stations, and now have been here in San Diego working in the pediatrics department for just over 5 years. The biggest hardship that I've overcome since joining the Navy and in my career is probably the balance between being both a mom and a pediatrician in the Navy. The challenges are definitely there. Whether you're active duty or not active duty, pursuing a career and being a mom definitely pulls you in multiple different directions. But I think the adjustment to having a child at home and then being responsible for caring for kids at work adds a whole new level of adjustment, and definitely makes you think differently about both your career as a mom and your career as a pediatrician. I think I'm probably a much better pediatrician now because I have my own kids and I've seen the struggles that we go through on a daily basis at home to make everything work. And it definitely gives me a lot of empathy towards my families, and I can much better understand the challenges that they're going through. Especially when families have a service member deployed or TAD for extended periods of time. My husband is also active duty, and for his last duty station, he was actually stationed away from us, and so we saw him less frequently, which that definitely added to the challenges of parenting and making sure that we were taking care of everything both at home and at work. But that's definitely given me some great insight to be able to talk to families when they're going through those similar challenges. Probably the biggest improvement that I've seen in the military since in the time that I've been active duty has been the extension of the maternity benefits. With my first 2 kids, maternity leave was only 6 weeks, and that was just about the point that you were starting to feel like that breastfeeding was going well, that you were starting to get a rhythm with the baby and starting to enjoy some of that time a little bit, and then it was time to jump right back into work. With our 3rd child, I was actually able to take the full 12 weeks with the extended benefits, and that made such a huge difference in both my bonding with my baby as well as the stress of trying to go back into balancing both my career and mothering. So it definitely was a big leap forward and takes care of our people really well, which is terrific. And as far as a piece of advice that I would give to someone entering the military, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to jump in with both feet, look for those opportunities. The military has all kinds of things to offer, places that you wouldn't be able to go otherwise, as well as opportunities. When I was in medical school, I was able to do a rotation as a flight surgeon, and I was able to go up in helicopters and airplanes and practice jumping out of airplanes onto a jumping out of the airplane onto a trampoline, which is something that none of my other medical school colleagues that were not in the military got to do. So there are definitely opportunities everywhere, and I would encourage anyone coming in to look for those opportunities and jump into them.
Our last interviewee for today is Chief Navarro Dominique. She currently works as the lead Chief Petty Officer of the Outpatient Mental Health at Naval Medical Readiness and Training Command. Chief Navarro joined the Navy in December of 2008 out of North Carolina. Chief is known for her helpful nature and her driven personality.
Hi, good morning. My name's Chief Navarro. I would have to say that one of my biggest successes in the Navy, I wouldn't name any one because it was pretty successful every time I made rank, right? So the first time I put on Petty Officer, right? That was that success. and then I put on second class and then third class, and then now obviously chief. So I would have to say that I celebrated every one of my ranks as a success. I would have to say one of the biggest hardships that I did overcome in the Navy was in 2014. I had just checked into my command in Connecticut. I wasn't a new second class, I was a more senior second class, but it was the first time I was taking over a supervisor position, and it was a mixture of officers, junior officers, very junior sailors, and civilians as well. So it was hard because I had a great chief at the time in the billet, and then she PCS'd maybe 6 months later. She really kind of taught me everything that I needed to know as far as being an LPO, very junior LPO, right, second class. And then she left, and her billet was gapped for probably about 12 to 18 months. So I was acting LPO and LCPO as a second class. I had a lot of support. I had a great support system from higher up, such as the OIC of the clinic. But it was definitely, there was a lot of workarounds, I'd have to say, as a second class, not really being privy to a lot of information. Like, I wasn't invited to the chief's meetings, right? And I didn't have an LCPO at the time. So information would filter down, and then I did the best that I could. I did get a chief and then an HM1 right as I was leaving, and they took over for me. But it was a good 18 months that I was acting as LPO and LCPO as an HM2. So it was a great experience. I got a lot of leadership training in that time, and then it carried on into my next duty station. So I'm actually very grateful for that time period that I had. It took me out of my comfort zone. And one of the big improvements for women equality since I've joined the Navy, I know that women have been starting going into combat. We're being placed on submarines, right? So there's now female submarine IDCs. That happened while I was in Connecticut, actually. So I saw female IDCs coming through the clinic. They would do their rotations at the clinic. And then just this past week, the Air Force now has their first command Chief Master Sergeant Joanne Bass. So she was just named the 19th and the first female. So that's a win for females, women in the Navy or in the military. I know it's not Navy related, but it's still women in the military. So I'd have to say that for sure. Piece of advice that I have, this could go for men and women alike. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? So you're going to be placed in a situation, you're always going to be placed in a situation that you're uncomfortable with. Get comfortable, because if you're relaxed and you're too comfortable in what it is that you're doing, then you're not growing. And if you're not growing, how are you going to grow your sailors? How are you going to lead sailors or whatever branch that you're in if you're not growing yourself? So bloom where you're planted and get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I'd like to thank everyone who tuned into Diversity Committee's Women Equality event. It is important that we continuously recognize the women in our lives who help shape the world around us. I would like to also extend a special thanks to all 3 interviewees. Thank you for your time and sharing a small part of your story with all of us. I hope everyone has a great day and continue to work towards a better and equal future.